Welcome to Bold Encounters. Does thinking really affect your career? If you get alone somewhere and you schedule time with yourself to think about improving your career in any way, does it matter? Does it even make a difference? Well, not only does it make a difference, but you have to create a series of dedicated times and really deeply think in the right places to have it matter. And you better execute that plan.
How does one be a driver in one's life? That requires thinking. It requires taking time out to say, what do I want? Even being really honest about yourself, like, who am I as a person and what kinds of things are important to me, but what's also important to people around me. But this thinking work is really this unseen processing. This thinking time often changes the order in which we approach things. This amazing middle school teacher I had who ran an alternative outdoor fitness class where she made us do crazy stuff as 11 and 12-year-olds. And she was basically training us how to be tough. But more than that, I think training us like, how do you support each other? And also, how do you just figure out what you need to do in your own mind to keep going? I get asked for performance hacks all the time. I think that what happens behind the scenes in our brain.
So today I have with me Dr. Carla Fowler, MD, PhD, both, and world champion at a sport we'll talk about in a second. How are you? I'm going to call you Carla. Is that all right?
That is totally fine, Mark. It's so great to be here. It's a lovely morning in Tucson, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I love Tucson. Well, I want to start out right off the bat. I want to give those that have to get on with life the opportunity here. Your best advice that you have, the number one thing that you would want to tell my listeners right off the bat. I just want to give it away early and fully. Tell me if you had one thing to tell them, what would you tell them?
Mark, I get asked for performance hacks all the time, and it's all about how do I do more? How do I be more productive, organize things? And my biggest piece of advice is actually when we're looking at that, we're looking in the wrong initial place. Because I think that what happens behind the scenes in our brain sets us up for success before we ever try to start to say, okay, and then what's the most efficient way to do X, Y, or Z? What I'm saying is we got to spend time thinking. And I think we got to think about just a couple really important initial questions. Number one, what do you want is often a question that just drives everything. Because what you choose to do will come out of that. But I think the second important question is,
hey, just a few seconds. As a premium member, you make a difference, not just a buck. Now you can give the gift of Bold Encounters Premium to someone else who you think could do the same. It takes just seconds at boldencounters.tv. Think of one person, a founder, a young adult, some person that you've helped mentor, raise, a leader, or even the chief executive. Give them the gift of weekly action plans with experts right by their side. Give them clarity and confidence to remove roadblocks and lead life's work just like you do. Go to boldencounters.tv and give the gift of premium to someone you care about. Thank you for making this all possible, and we'll see you soon.
what is actually really most important to drive that forwards? Not just what are all the things I could do. And even as I'm saying these questions, someone might be like, well, I'll take some time to sort of think about that. And I might even have to do a little research but what I think is we have to come back to that space because everything else we do will be more successful if we start there.
Yeah, it's interesting. What a person wants may not be the answer. But when you're saying the second part, which is what's most important, and usually that's for other people, whether it's the person in life that they're most capable of helping first, or an ideal customer profile, or an ideal client individual. A lot of people just can't get their own desires out of the way. And I think as long as you're committed to doing the second part, which is getting to the important, it can be useful to get out of the way. Like, what do I want? And then discover the conflict sometimes between sometimes what you want shouldn't matter that much. It should be what's most important. And it helps you sort it out. But if you're trying to think what you should do most important and you just can't get over what you really instinctively want to get for yourself, sometimes it just keeps staying in the way. Is that what you find?
Well, I think you brought up something really important, which is what we often do. I think we think a lot. And that's kind of a mixture of, we have a lot of noise in our brain. We have a lot of inputs coming in. We're reacting to a lot of things. And it can feel like, in fact, we would just love our brain to quiet down. And so this is why I think sometimes people tell me, I'll be like, okay, it'd be worthwhile to set aside some time dedicated to thinking. And they'll be like, Carla, I'm thinking all the time. And I'm like, I believe you. But what often happens in that thinking all the time is we might actually be feeling something versus like having a thought. That's common. We might be just reacting. And of course, we have all sorts of patterns in our brain that help us get along in life. But I mean, we're kind of reacting based on old patterns as opposed to thinking this might be a new situation. This might need something, a new or a different kind of response. And what happens with all of that is it keeps our brains really busy, but it doesn't give us some time to take multiple inputs, for example, maybe what I want, but also what might be important to someone else, or, strategically what is possible at this moment. It doesn't give us a chance to integrate and look at all of those things. That's actually a lot of stuff to try and hold in your brain. And that's where this idea of protecting some time, sitting down with a pad of paper so you could actually get some stuff out of your brain and in front of you, free up some RAM, has a really powerful effect that is different than just that sense of I'm kind of spinning or perseverating on something, or I'm thinking about it in 1 minute in between task A and task B. And so our brains evolve as we start to work on something. It's not just doing the same loop over and over again. And when we give ourselves some quiet space, I call it, we start to translate what we want. It has to get forced through our language center onto like the page. And that as we do that, our thoughts become better vetted. They become more clear. And that's where you start to be able to translate what you might want or what might be important into actual reality, like into a plan. So important work is happening during that thinking time. So just back to what you were saying, like, how is it different? But I think it is different than just, like saying, well, what do I want in this instant? And then letting that drive something.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It sounds a little bit, to use an analogy, it sounds like that moment when you're out there getting ready to go on a trip and you are thinking what to bring, and you're scouring for all the things to pack and trying to cover everything, and it's that moment versus that's the mind like grabbing every thought or reacting to your current situation and the people around you and the challenge at hand, versus sitting down and saying, where are we even going? And making it purposeful. And I love what you said about forcing it through the language centers, by forcing it into language, the symbols that we use, which are English in our case, and putting it on paper, and even going out into a park in solitude and saying it out loud and getting it through your voice faculties, and hearing how it sounds to yourself, because we assume that's all the same stuff, and it is just not how the brain works, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get practical for a second. So we're saying they should think, but you brought up the idea of not just doing it once, as we spoke earlier. Tell us the actual practice, like if you had a step-by-step, okay, I'm willing to do this more proactive thinking, more serious thinking. What do you want me to do?
Great question. There isn't sort of one hard and fixed thing for this, but I think there is sort of a range, and then I always recommend, like, having thinking time better than not doing it, so people will evolve it, make it work for them. But I would say start with something simple, but that you can absolutely complete consistently, because what you wanna do is build the habit. You wanna stack up thinking time, over days, over weeks, over years. That is what's going to give you the really powerful impacts of it. And so I always say start small, but be consistent, and then you can always build it up. So if people are starting right now, I would say put 1 hour on your calendar this week. Like, find some time and try to put it in a place where you could set yourself up for success. So, for example, if you know a meeting always runs over, don't put it right after that meeting. um, I also recommend putting it at a place where you won't have to like shift gears from like, you know, 0 to 60 really quickly. So, for example, sometimes on a weekend, it's a little easier to have a step back from the day to day. You might be working, but you might not be in the middle of a block of 8 hours of meetings, for example. Because I find it is often hard to get our brains to get started on the thinking and kind of phase into it. So I recommend maybe not having it again in between two highly intense things that are going to be hard to sort of unwind and then wind back up your brain. But I say start with an hour a week and put it on your calendar so that it doesn't get scheduled over. And then find a good place to do it. Might just mean shutting the door to your office. It might be some people like ambient noise, so a cafe is great. Some people are like, nope, I need it to be quiet. So, maybe the park, or again, like being sort of at home when no one else is around is better. But that's sort of practically where I would start for people.
Yeah, I just add to that I spent 10 years in time management in a company when I was starting out my professional career. And it's amazing how hard it is to have serious business people think that scheduling, planning in solitude, as we call it, or
hmm
time in solitude to think and write down a plan, it's hard for them to think that that's work. It feels like, what, I'm going to schedule an hour at a park to go walk and sit at a bench and write every week? That is frivolous, ridiculous, not work. And it couldn't be further from the truth to feel like that's frivolous. 1 hour to figure out what your heading is and if you're on path. It is an obvious thing to do for us that are in this business and see the results of it. It is really the furthest thing from the idea of working and being productive to so many people, don't you find?
I find this to be very true. And I think we, particularly for high capacity people, the idea of what could be accomplished in an hour, and we often have a very concrete sense of, oh, if I work for that hour, like truly, do tasks, how much could I get done? And and so I think the way it appears in people's minds is like, I could do work for an hour, or I could do nothing for an hour. But this thinking work is really this unseen processing that then changes both what work we actually choose to do, how effective is that work, like how well have we prioritized what tasks will actually have the biggest impact for us. This thinking time often changes the order in which we approach things. And, do we get to bigger priorities sooner so that we get the clock started on those in a way that we see the impact sooner? So there are all these ways in which thinking can actually have a very concrete impact on what we accomplish, but also how we feel about what we accomplish. And so this is the second piece. So I always try, with people who are very practical, I always try and say, listen, this will actually improve your concrete results. It is not an hour lost from work time. It will probably save you some time and or help you focus on things that are actually going to give you the results versus a number of things we might do, but that actually aren't that important to the results we're trying to get. So that's the concrete impact. But one of the surprising impacts that is a little less tangible is how we feel when we actually spend some time thinking, decide how to balance out what we want, what might be most important, and then decide what priorities actually stack up to really drive us towards that in the most potent way. When we do that, and then we deliberately block time in our calendars to do those tasks, how we feel at the end of a day is very different. It creates a greater sense of self-efficacy. It creates a greater sense of momentum versus how people feel when they get up at the beginning of the day and say, I'm going to do as much as possible. And even if they are super productive, you end the day, you still have a list of to-dos because that is the nature of work. And you just feel a little run ragged by like the treadmill, of your own making.
Yeah.
And so how people feel is really different. And I think in hard jobs like leading a company, or if you're like earlier in career, if you're climbing a big career journey, maybe you're taking on something really ambitious, like how you feel matters because that is what keeps us in the game. And so that's the less tangible, but I think equally important impact of that thinking time and then translating that into what are your activities.
Yeah. There's a lot of business people who don't like the idea of feeling, and it doesn't have a place in business, and that is a ridiculous notion because from the very first second of pursuing a prospective client, feeling matters in 10 ways we won't cover here because it's not a sales episode. We have those. Go listen to them. But if you get to the point where you're interacting with a human being that hasn't decided to even take serious what you do yet, feeling is tremendously important on both sides. How you feel about what you do and how valuable it is, and how they feel about what the possibilities are, and the trust that they're trying to decide on in their head as they interact with you. And then as you commit with them or get rejected, which happens more than being accepted.
Yes.
How you feel and react to that matters. Feeling, I could keep going all the way through a customer journey or through our own journey. Feeling, get over the idea that I shouldn't acknowledge and have an out-of-body experience and look down and say, how am I feeling right now and what does it mean for the action that takes place in my work life? Because it matters tremendously. And so that's a really great point. Let me ask you, based on what you said, would you then sometimes in a month, let's say, if you're saying let's schedule this every week, an hour at least, would you schedule this time in solitude once in a while in the morning and maybe half of the time in the afternoon then because of the different operating environments inside your head? Or what do you think?
It's a great question. I always base this because I work with a lot of different kinds of clients and I'm a very practical person. So I say, do it when you will do it. And that the benefits of, if you're just a morning person and you're worthless after lunch, do it always in the morning. Now, I like to help people be flexible. So if someone was suddenly telling me that they now have a standing meeting every day where they're not going to be able to do it in the morning, yeah, we're going to help them figure out how to do it at a different time. But I think the timing is probably less important than just doing it. But I would say that once our brains get going, it tends to be more difficult. So if there's any chance someone can do this in the morning, I often find that's a good time to do it. Unless someone's totally night owl and it's quiet at home late at night and that's when they feel energized, great. Then I would do that. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to I left the outer door to my studio open. I'm getting some ambient noise. So I'm going to just hang on for a second. Okay. We're not going to stop this or anything. I'm just going to solve this. I'm throwing all these little curveballs at you this morning. Sorry.
Oh, we're doing great.
You're doing great. This is really interesting to me. I know that there's 20% of the people out there that are fascinated by what you say with this one topic, and then there's a lot that aren't. But it's so interesting to me. Super interesting. All right, we're gonna go to this crazy story that's amazing next. Okay, I'm gonna yell so you can see my audio spikes and catch it. All right, let's move on, and I want to get to your story. Tell us a little teeny bit about, just a couple of minutes about your background as a youth, and then get into the story of choosing what you want to do in your postgraduate or your graduate work and college and all that. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just outside Seattle, Washington. I'm a middle kid. I have an older sister, younger brother, and I don't know if we were a typical Northwest family, but we did a lot of outdoor stuff growing up. We went backpacking. That was a serious hobby for my parents, and I bring this up because I think I learned a lot about grit really early. I mean, they were taking us out as soon as you could walk. You were out of the carry pack and you had a backpack on your back. And we would go out, for 7 days at a time. I mean, my dad sometimes had to hike in and cache food so that we could pick it up, partway through the trip. So I think very early on, by the way, I did not like it. I'll just be very honest. I love backpacking
Sorry, Mom
now.
and Dad.
Yeah, no, I mean, trust me, they were aware. But no, but I really appreciate them because I think one of the great things you have to figure out for yourself as you're turning from a kid and learning to be an independent adult is like, how do you deal with stuff you don't want to do? How do you deal with stuff that feels challenging? And literally you're like hot, sweaty, your back hurts, your feet hurt. You're like, how much further to the campsite? That's good stuff to know. And that was only continued by this amazing middle school teacher I had who ran an alternative outdoor fitness class where she made us do crazy stuff as 11 and 12-year-olds. So she had us walking 55 miles around Lake Washington in 24 hours. So we did not sleep. We just kept walking and we did the whole thing. Some parents had to come too. She made us train for a half marathon and run it. She would always make us go hiking and like go in these glacier cold lakes. You had to go all the way in up to your neck, like 4 or 5 times. And she was basically training us how to be tough. But more than that, I think training us like how do you support each other? And also how do you just figure out what you need to do in your own mind to keep going, even when you're uncomfortable, even if you don't want to do it. How do you get out of that rest break at like 25 miles and finish the last 25 miles of that walk? So that's just a little bit about, I think, some defining things from my childhood that really struck a chord. And of course, they helped me understand that I really liked athletics, particularly sort of endurance type stuff. But so I was a runner in high school. And I guess the other important things there, I learned pretty early that I was really interested in performance, like very curious, always observing. How is it that people are good at hard stuff? That's about as, sophisticated as I was thinking about it at that age. But I was a problem solver, loved math and science. And so I really approached the world. I saw that there were things I wanted. And I was really interested in like, how do people go get that stuff? How do you go do that? And so clearly grit and hard work, I learned that very early. Like, okay, if you want something challenging, if you want to win the track meet, you're going to have to train. You need to work really hard. So that was like kind of early days. And then, went off to college to do engineering, rapidly figured out I was more interested in people than sort of circuits or bridges. And And so rapidly kind of shifted that into a pre-med pathway, sort of a pathway that would let me kind of help people, be really directly interacting with them, solving problems for them.
Let me ask you something about that.
Yeah.
So the pre-med is kind of its own package that you lump on top of a major, right? And you're this young, formative young lady. Did you keep doing the engineering major, or did you just switch majors, or what?
Oh, it's so funny. I switched major, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of the amounts of sciences you need. So
Uh-huh.
I no one in my family is a doctor, so I sort of went into the pre-med dean's office and just said, "Hey, I'd like to do this. Like, what do I need to do?" And he looked at my first year transcript from engineering and was like, "Oh, well, you've already completed." He's like, "You did all this in 1 year?" I was like, "Yeah, that's a normal engineering schedule." And he was like, "Oh, you've done half of the requirements, already." So
Nice.
it was it was easier
Yeah,
than
I
one
was
might
gonna
have
say
thought.
you picked a really difficult major, so grit had translated into school. And you weren't seeking out
Yeah.
like a communications degree. No offense, communication. Most of my family's communication degree, but I did marketing, not engineering, not accounting. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I mean, it was fortunate, and again, I was often being led by, well, what am I interested in? What am I kind of engaged with? But also in the back of my mind, I was very interested in like, where are there jobs? Like I knew at the end of this thing I needed a job. And so I was very driven by, I like math and science, and there are a number of jobs or career paths in those places. And but I want to do something I really like. So medicine definitely kind of captured my interest. And then at some point someone told me that they had these programs where you could get an MD, but if you agreed to also get a PhD, that they would pay for the whole thing. Now, it takes you 9 or 10 years instead of 4 years, but it's a program that they support because they want more physician scientists. And I just thought to myself, well, that sounds really hard, which I often was drawn to trying to do hard things because I had learned that, well, it sometimes sucks while you're doing it, but you emerge and you're more confident and you have so many more skills and you know how you get yourself to do these things. And I also was like, and it's paid for. I mean, I knew, med school was expensive, and so I was like, this sounds like the best deal ever. It's a good pathway. I will learn a lot, and so that's what I did. So I pursued those programs, and I went and got my MD and my PhD at the University of Washington.
Mm.
Um, and like so far, smooth sailing. Like everything's going great.
Well, before you get to the
Yeah.
next part, I've got to ask you about this part because you just
Oh
flew
yeah.
right over something that the rest of us slammed right into. And I remember thinking about what to do after college, and I wanted to get a graduate degree. I didn't care what it was in the moment, but I started thinking about the different possibilities. No one in my family had really done that. They'd gotten some postgraduate certificates and things in the community, but an accredited master's, no one could tell me either. And I remember being on a bicycle. I was that young, and I remember the corner of the block I was on when I had this internal conversation. Well, let's see, an MBA would be 2 years and a law degree would be 3. Oh, that extra year. Oh no. So the grit mindset that you had developed was not really present. And so I want to hear us say again what you said. I'm going to say the practical. So you said, oh, it's just 4 or 5 more years after medical school. No problem, because hard things really pay off in the end, regardless of what happens. Before you tell us what happened, which is huge, tell us
Yeah.
whether you still believe that. Give us that little lesson in a sentence, and tell us whether you believe it or not.
Like whether or not hard things always pay off.
Yeah. So if you had
Yeah.
when you're going through life, you say, "Oh, 5 extra years, no problem. It's seriously hard work, and 5 years of it, no big deal because it's going to pay off." You still
I
believe
can
that?
I can absolutely tell you that, like, at the time, probably should have spent more time thinking about that. And simultaneously, like, do not regret the choice I made. So these two things can be true all at the same time. And what I would recommend, but what I certainly would recommend to someone else, is number one, what you want evolves. And so you sort of have to think about, what do you want right now? But it's also probably worth thinking about, what might you want in the future? And the other thing is, you have to properly account for all of the things you might want. So if you're just thinking in one category, like career-wise, I was like, well, if I have an MD PhD, then I will be way more competitive for jobs. I think I'll have more optionality down the road. I also was very interested to learn the science, and so to acquire like that extra knowledge. But I think one of the things that didn't get accounted for was, for example, well, okay, but how do you imagine like putting all of those things together at the end? And you don't always have the answer at the moment when you make the decision. So I think this is another important thing to say. But using this simple, it was not a terrible heuristic growing up to say, if you know how to do hard things, it will often lead you to places where you do have opportunities, but it is not necessarily a focused nor efficient way to get places. And again, if you're just going to use a heuristic, it wasn't a bad one, but we don't always have to use heuristics. That's where a heuristic in some ways is a quick thinking pattern as opposed to a deeper thinking pattern. And so this is an interesting moment when, for me, I was like, well, I wouldn't have to worry about paying for school. Plus, it's hard. I'll probably have a lot more opportunities. Great. I won't have to think about what I'm doing for at least 8 years, because the next 8 years are spoken for. And those are all pluses, but I think there was more complexity to it. And I might have thought harder. I might have made the same decision. We don't get to go back. But I love that you called that out so we can unpack it a little bit, because I think, again, heuristics can be useful. And that was one that I used. Is it hard? Great. Probably it'll be. And it wasn't hard. I mean, obviously, it wasn't an unstrategic thing to go do. It's an MD PhD. It's not, there are clear job prospects at the end of it. But still, it was a blunt tool as opposed to a more nuanced like thought pattern.
Well, what I hear is you've got 360 degrees of paths at that moment, and you see one, whatever the circumstances are that put you in the interest of one, and you look down a little bit. You can't see very far, but you can see a few years, and you say, wow, it's really hard. I love really hard, but financially not at all hard because of what I've prepared myself like. And I look at the surroundings for the first part of the path, and it looks really great. So let's go, without thinking of the destination at the end of that path. Is that about right? Is that what you're saying about heuristics?
Yeah, well, and again, I actually think it can be difficult for us as human beings to think 10 years down the road, which is, one of the pieces of this. But I think if someone else were at that decision point, I would obviously say, hey, here are some things you might think about. And I don't know how they would decide on those items, but I can think of probably at least 10 other things that I might have asked myself or done some research on or tried to talk to some people about.
List some of those quick. List some of those before we move on quick.
Yeah.
Those are interesting.
Well, I mean, for an example could be, and I'll use this example specifically, but what does it actually look like to practice as an MD, PhD? Do you do lots of research and lots of medicine? Do you tend to do more of one or the other? How do people use that extra degree? It would have also been useful to probably think a little more about even just medicine in general, to say, okay, what do the different specialties look like? What does the time equation look like? What does your work time equation look like when you are done there? So I think Those are some things. I think people obviously have to decide about some life stuff like, oh, what if you got married? What if you had kids? How would that change things? Sometimes those aren't things that you're thinking about at 24. But by the time
Yeah.
you get out of this program, you're 30, you're 32. And so some of these questions, when you start to think on those long horizons, do become important. Um, and
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's put you back there in the story. Here you are. You take it on.
Yeah. So
Continue
I
telling
take it
us.
on. I take it on. I enter my MD PhD program, and it's more school, and I know how to do school, and I'm good at school. And so
Apparently.
I kind of keep living my life. And one of the interesting things is that I always loved having a multi-channel life. So I liked playing sports. I liked having school. There were some other extracurriculars that I was a part of. And so to me, the ability to be training for medicine was sort of synonymous. It was fitting with all the life stuff I wanted. And so in college, I had road crew while I was doing pre-med. In med school, I started playing ultimate frisbee really seriously. And
what does playing ultimate frisbee really seriously look like? Is there a club team, or are you like
yeah,
with pickup, or what?
No, there are club teams around the world, but definitely like within the U.S. So I played for the elite women's frisbee team in Seattle. It was called Seattle Riot, and there's a whole circuit, and there are national championships, and there are world championships, and so it's a club sport. And
Wow.
and there are brackets, and you had to try out for the team, and so I did that. So it's just an example of I was doing the training, and I continued that during my PhD, which I was doing in immunology. But I had a lot of life flexibility, and I was kind of managing my time, but keeping everything sort of moving forwards while doing a lot of different life stuff that I was interested in. And I would say that the PhD was more challenging than medical school because it's an unstructured problem. There's not like a playbook or you just have to pass these tests. You actually go to work every day not knowing the answer, and you have to figure out what experiments you're going to run to actually learn the science, learn how the biology works.
Sometimes
And,
even the question, right? Like you don't even know the question. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so really when things started to change, so everything, I had a lot of flexibility, a lot of autonomy, doing my work, playing my sports, being social. And then what happens towards the very end is you finish your PhD and you have to go back and finish the second half of medical school. You did the first half, and then you went to do your PhD, and you have to go back, finish the second half. And that is when they put you in the hospital. And that is when the hours you work start to go up, and you're a little at the whim of like, well, what patients come in and what do your residents need you to do? And I think that was the first time that I started to understand what it was like to like lose autonomy of my time. And that was a little bit of a shocker at that moment. But I also, to kind of save myself a year, because I didn't want to spend another year. It was already going to be 9 years. I sort of had to rush back to the last 2 years. So I was still writing my PhD. I was still working to publish. So in the evenings, I'm doing PhD work. And during the days, I'm working these long days as a med student. And I also had sort of compressed my last 2 years. And so I was doing all the required rotations to pick my specialty, but I didn't have a lot of extra time to try different things. And the general surgeons loved me. And I was like, I like procedural work. Great. Surgery's my thing. It's difficult. This will work. And so ultimately I matched into a general surgery residency program. And I remember thinking those 2 years were very tough years to be sort of trying to do two things at once and working all hours of the day. But I kind of left and thought, okay, great. I graduated. I got my 2 degrees. I successfully matched into a residency program. Whew. Now we can reset. We're going to have a break. But anyone who can see where this is leading is like, oh, you're in a general surgery residency program? I watched Grey's Anatomy. They are there all the time. And so,
all
of
the time.
course, like what this actually launched into is, like 80 to 100-hour weeks. You're new, you're learning, you really don't know a lot. And like hospitals are tough places. Like our healthcare system is stressed and there's a lot of work to be done. Not enough people to do it. And I I watched, this choice that had been sort of 10 years in the making, um, really sort of manifest in really what it was. There was nothing wrong in the sense of like, no, this was just pretty normal. Um, but realizing that the way I'd kind of managed my time and my schedule and some of the values that I had, like I really love to exercise, love to play sports. I had a like my now husband, but my fiance at the time had come with me to residency, and we didn't have a lot of time together. And so I really got out into the practice of medicine at that moment and had this sort of cold water shock of like, oh, I don't know that this is what I thought it would be. And I don't know if going forwards, like this fits with like what I'm imagining. And I'll tell you, that is a hard thing to be thinking in the back of your head, like at that moment when you've worked so hard to get there and the performance expectations are high and you want to do a good job and you're just trying to fit it all together and not clear how that's going to happen.
Well, and
And
also
yeah.
you had some of it paid for, but it's extremely expensive. All the other half, right?
Well, fortunately, you get paid as a resident. You don't get paid a lot,
But I
but
mean, med school, like here you are, you've invested the time and you got the PhD paid for, but you still had to live and pay for some of it, and so it's a lot of money you've just bet in your medical school before you're getting into the after effects of medicine, right?
I mean, fortunately, it was not quite as bad as that. The med school was paid for also.
Oh
And
wow,
this is
you
one of
are
those
smart.
places. Well, no, I mean, as we've discussed, maybe not, maybe, but
Well, in a certain way, yes. At the time, you were very smart. Okay.
well,
All
but
right, keep going then.
this is where optionality sometimes comes into play, where when we make choices, there are trade-offs, and some of the trade-offs are good, and some of the trade-offs are not. But um, really, like I got into that, and at that moment in my life, was having trouble putting it together with what are some things that are important to me, what do I want to be doing, and is this pathway it? And certainly there are plenty of sort of sunk costs already, but the idea of continuing for another 6 years of residency, if in year one you're already starting to have some doubts about it, like is this the right fit for me? Um, it was hard, but in my mind I was like, no, it does not make sense to do 6 more years of this. But that means I need to be willing to face like, okay, well, what are you going to do? What are you excited about? What might sort of help you build the life that you want? And that is when I came to the thought of like, I might need to make a dramatic pivot. In fact, pivot may not even be the right word. um,
It's
but
more of a
I
plunge. You
more of
you
a
didn't like
plunge,
just
I
change a
think.
little bit of medical direction. Like maybe
Yeah.
I'll just do family practice. You could have, right? You have your MD at the end of an
Hmm.
MD, and you have a PhD.
Yeah.
You could have been a family practice or a general doctor.
Yeah.
No, you
And
didn't do that. You
I
plunged.
no, I plunged.
Yeah.
I um and again, I think part of it was saying, all right, if you've had the big discovery of like you want some more autonomy of time, and I've been in systems and just jumping through the hoops, what's the next hard thing? Jump through that hoop, what's the next hard thing? Maybe it's time for you to like actually force yourself into an experience where you need to drive it, and you need to say what you want, and then you need to build what that is. Because
Mhm.
clearly in letting like if you're letting the system kind of pull you along, even if you're doing it really successfully, like hasn't like hasn't helped you be a driver
Mhm.
necessarily. And this is where we're just coming back to that theme of like, how does one be a driver in one's life? That requires thinking. It requires taking time out to say, what do I want? Even being really honest about yourself, like um, who am I as a person and what kinds of things are important to me, but what's also important to people around me. For example, I can tell you my fiance was not having a great time during that residency. Just as an
Alone in
example.
Tucson and changing all of life, not seeing the person he loves. Yeah, that guy's brave. What's his name?
His name's Eric.
Eric. You're a hero. Yeah. Okay, keep
He
going.
is a hero. He's one of the
Yeah.
best things in my life. He's an excellent
For
person.
sure.
Um, but I think it was this moment of saying, how did you get here? And I learned a lot, but it was like, you got to be a driver. And so what happened was I feel great sense of responsibility to teams. And so I let the program know that I'd finished the year, but they should fill my spot. So I didn't leave a gap, and which they did successfully. And then I left, which is a thing very few people do. And you lose a tribe, you lose a lot of status when you leave something like that. And I really kind of started at zero in a lot of ways and started to say, what are the threads I want to pick back up? What am I really interested in? What do I think I'm good at? And if I were going to build something that was my own, what would that be? And so the threads that I picked up, and by the way, a lot of this manifestation is still in these journals that are in storage boxes, because it wasn't like someone said, oh, Carla, you should just do this, slot yourself in here, and then go. Ultimately, I realized that I'd always been fascinated by performance, that I was very good at the sort of, let's say, motivational interviewing pieces of medicine. I was very good with people. I was good at talking with them about hard things. I was good at helping them with decision making. And that I had had some coaching experiences previous in my life where I was like, I think I like the act of helping other people be successful, like dialoguing with them. And so I put all of this together, plus like my science training, and said, but I'm really still a scientist at heart. And if I'm going to go into coaching, I want to sort of build something and do something a little bit different. And so ultimately, what the idea, again, none of this is built, right? This is just the vision. I said, all right, I think I want to build a coaching practice that really uses performance science as a basis for helping leaders go after ambitious goals. But coming to that conclusion took time and thinking. And now, of course, anyone who's ever built a business, led a business, knows that having a vision is not enough. So not only was I telling everyone that I had left medicine, but that I wasn't going to just put myself back into another system, and that I was going to build this thing that no one could totally picture. And by the way, I have no traction, nor have I ever been trained in business, because med school doesn't really teach you this. And so that was the beginning. This was about 13 years ago. And that was the beginning of like a very hard journey of saying, how do you build something piece by piece? And how do you do that when there isn't necessarily a playbook and you're trying to do things a little bit differently? And I had to, I think there were a lot of really good learnings, both about how do you use thinking time for that? How do you translate that into plans when you're like, I should be doing everything, and you're getting advice like, you should do this, you should do this. And when there always feels like there's way too much to do.
Yeah.
And so there were definitely, I think, some tools that helped me in that early period, which we could certainly think about. But and I'll tell you, it did not immediately manifest. That is not this kind of story. This is like a 10-year march. This is a 10-year march up a hill of believing in something, seeing it, but also trying to stack up and use some of the principles to say, how do you think and then plan something into being, and how do you have to align your time with that? And what is it that keeps you going motivationally while you're doing that?
Yeah, I'm going to just throw in, just because it's a whole nother fascinating story. Maybe we should get back together someday. But you know how to work hard, and that smart brain of yours is a great strategic tool. And you help that team become world champions at Frisbee, right? You're a world champion. So you're on scholarship for PhD, you're on scholarship for MD, and you're world champion, then you're going to plunge into something brand new, right? Is that kind of what's
Yes.
going on? Okay, so this
Yeah.
is the point where you've invested a lot of time with me, and I'm going to try to help pay you back a little bit, because not only am I curious, but I know the audience is curious. You're not someone who's a coach. I mean, coach is kind of a word about someone who goes and has had a lot of experience and listens to a CEO or a leader and provides some experience-based advice. And that's not who you are. You are someone who's a thinker and a doer, and so you need a methodology. So
Yeah.
tell us what you put together as a methodology for these CEOs and why you. I know why you, because your brain is sitting smart. That 13 years is plenty of time to create a methodology and talk to enough people and have experience doing it yourself as a founder and CEO to pull this off. But tell us about, before we get to the end here, tell us the methodology and how you came to it.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I think my methodology was definitely um, influenced by saying, okay, there are a lot of great ideas in performance science out there. I mean, the business schools are contributing them. There's obviously sociologists, psychologists, neurologists, lots of different fields are thinking about this question of how do people do challenging things really successfully. But one of the things I know is the world is noisy. And so I was like, there's lots of great science, but no one wants an academic lecture from me. Like, they want to know how to use this stuff. And so I need to distill it. And ideally, what I wanted to do was distill it in a way that we could say, hey, whenever you're having a challenge or problem, there are probably at least 4 different sort of performance angles through which we could approach that problem. Because I no person is the same as another person. And so you need a methodology that both they can use that is simple enough, but also that leaves room for individual variability. And to
Well,
know
while we're at
even,
this,
yeah,
let me just interrupt and say, while we're at this early point of you
yeah.
telling us this, what are those 4 angles?
Yeah. The 4 angles are, number 1, you can always think about like, what might be is this a problem that has a strategic solution? And by that I mean, where if you say what things are most important, what are the like best approaches versus all the things we could do, what is going to have the most impact. Strategy is really an exercise in focus, of saying what few things are we going to focus on and what are all the things we're not going to do. So sometimes you solve a problem by thinking strategically and saying, how do we narrow our focus? A second angle is really this angle of execution, is to say, hey, there are lots of ways to do some approach we've decided, but we could think about what might be the most effective or efficient. How do we get our teams lined up to do that? The productivity movement kind of lives in this bucket. But so you can also think a lot about execution. Sometimes you need a solution from that angle. Third bucket is really about mindset. It's about the psychology. And, a lot of motivating teams, of our confidence, of our charisma lives in that mindset bucket. It's sort of how are we feeling? How are we framing things in our minds? What's our perspective on it? Matters a lot, particularly when you're doing hard things that take a long time. And then the fourth bucket is our physiology. It's literally like our biology and like the hormones and chemicals running through us and our nervous systems. And so this is one that often gets ignored, but I like to bring it up because we know that whether or not you've had enough sleep, whether or not you're kind of constantly riding at the top of your stress level, like in kind of fight or flight, has a lot to do with how creative are we? What kinds of decisions do we make? How well can we connect with other people? So that fourth bucket is really thinking about how we're caring for our physiology.
Mm, awesome. Well, okay, so continue. So you
Yeah.
built, tell us how you build it and what it is that you built besides looking at things 4 different ways.
Yeah. Well, some of that is really to think about, all right, within those buckets, what are some of the most important principles And notably, I definitely like had to learn some of those principles along the way, or like use them myself as I was building the practice. So, for example, when you think about strategy, I think one of the biggest things that I see go wrong is like we try to do way too many things. We think we use try to do everything or do as much as possible as the strategy, as opposed to saying, I spent some time thinking and made a bet, said, I think these things are more important than all these other things, even if other people are doing these other things. And so I'm going to focus more of my time and resources on these fewer set of objectives or approaches. And I call this brutal focus, because almost always people don't need to do more. They need to do less and put more effort towards it. And so a great story for me, like in those first 10 years when I had no clients and I was building the methodology, was people were like, you need a blog, you need to start publicly speaking, you should do retreats. Like there were just all these things, like advice I was
Do
getting.
social media marketing. Yeah.
Yes, all of it.
SEO. Yeah.
So many things. And one of the things I came to after thinking about it a lot was like, that was way too many things for me to learn all at once or to do effectively. And so I said, I need like 2 to 3 areas of focus. And so what I chose to focus on was when I had clients, it was like the coaching methodology needs to be really excellent, because I know the best marketing for me is someone telling someone else to come and work with me, and they need to see results themselves. So that was one area of focus, but it was not the whole focus, because at least 50% of my effort, if not 60, was like, you need to learn how to sell. Fundamentally, like this is a business where there is making stuff and there is selling stuff. And no one knows you for this thing. You need to get out and meet people, talk about what you're doing, build relationships, and learn how to pitch, learn how to like talk about what makes your coaching different, or how you might be able to help with a problem, but also just meet people and learn what they're up to. And so I really I sent emails, I had coffees, and I just really focused on it. There was no blog, no marketing, no other marketing. But what it did was it taught me, and I was terrible at pitching, at least 100 times.
We all are, and continuously so. You're just always refining it.
Yes. Yeah. But because I was really focused and just forced myself to keep going back and having that moment where you're nervous and you're meeting someone new and you're wondering what they're going to think about you. And you have to just practice being confident and talking about what you know you can do. And it is through that practice, both stacking up relationships, but also stacking up that practice, that really made a potent difference in like years then 3 through 10. But it would have been so easy to distract myself from that by doing something less scary, less raw, and but brutal focus. So that's just a story or example of like where I was like, you could think about some of those other things, but now is not the moment to write a book.
Yeah.
So,
well, I love that. I'm going to highlight that last thing you said, and then we're going to shift gears and go into our premium action plan in a second. But you said stack this practice, but you use the word stack in a lot of ways. I think it's a really powerful concept because it's kind of an umbrella, so to speak. You are doing all this work and investment in time and life, and you said, I'm not pivoting, I'm leaving, and I'm plunging somewhere else. And the assumption is you wasted, but you talked about opportunity cost and the principle in business where you should not make decisions based on sunk cost. You should make it more on opportunity cost. Like, what are you going to miss if you don't plunge? And it's the good stuff that you're going to miss if you stay on a track where you're chasing a sunk, meaning you can't get it back anyway, cost or investment of time and life. You chase the past instead of the future, and it's a big problem. But I love how you talk about stacking experiences, and really nothing's wasted. Give me to close this normal and free episode out. Give me the stack philosophy of Dr. Carla Fowler.
Oh, I love that you asked this, because while I think it's very important to ask yourself like what you want or what is most important and get that idea, the turning that into action, to me, has to do with understanding what is the most important sort of stacking element of it. Like, what is the thing that you need to start doing now and keep doing? So a great example of this would be like when I coach startup founders, one of the things I'm always thinking about is like, they have to think about their next round, and they need to like basically build their network with potential investors. You always want a long list of people you can call at that moment. And so this idea of that's a thing you stack up that has like more value as you are like building it. Incidentally, you also get value when people know each other and know they all know you. So there's actually, it's not just about the number, but you also get some added kind of network effect in that and visibility. And so I often think about and have people think about, what's the thing you would stack up that gives you really potent direct impact, or is the thing that's most directly going to lead to the outcome you're looking for or the goal you're looking for. So another example is exercise. Like if you want to be more fit, there's not a lot of mystery there. It gets totally complicated, and it's a place where lots of people are looking for a hack, but literally you generally have to stack hours of moving, in some physically challenging way. But the reason I like to both identify that thing, and then the next piece is really you have to figure out, knowing that you can't just one and done it, then you have to say, well, how am I going to find that time or make sure I've protected time to stack that thing? Because I think often people know what they need to do, but it's the executing it and doing it consistently that is where the power really comes. It's not in the knowing. Like it's knowing is not the same as doing, and doing is not the same as doing consistently over time.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And all things end up working to our good. And that's why life was given to us. It's how life works.
Yeah.
Okay, so the lesson in the beginning. If pivoting is not enough and you're just stuck somewhere and you've got to get somewhere different, you're not making enough money, you're not finding enough joy, sometimes a pivot is a great idea. But it's also possible to just take the plunge. And if you have enough grit that you're thinking in years instead of days, and it's going to be tough, and there may not be a lot of money in the beginning. There certainly isn't when you're coming out of med school and quitting. But you really can do it. And then you talked about so many great ideas, which is thinking is a valuable tool, and it must be done repetitively in finding what you should be doing. Because if you're actually working at what you should be doing, it's not a long-term endeavor to make more money. You probably make more money if you do it very quickly. So you've got to look at the four aspects, and you have grit and all these things to make sure that you're pursuing the path in your work life that you should be pursuing. Where can we find you?
Well, thanks so much, Mark, for the great conversation. And for anyone who's just interested in learning more about performance science, I am on LinkedIn, so I'm often posting things there. And my website's a great resource. So that's at THAXA.com, THAXA. And so I have a lot of my interviews are posted there and some good FAQs. So those are two resources.
Now, we're going to transition next to a premium action plan where Dr. Carla Fowler actually gives us the plan this week to take the first and most important first step to do all of this. And then we're going to go into the micro steps of the days of this next 7 days where you can accomplish what she tells us we need to accomplish. Join us there. We'll see you there. Thank you for joining us here. Before we execute our premium action plan, I just want to thank you for fueling this movement on behalf of others. If you haven't yet, give the gift of premium at boldencounters.tv. It's the fastest, easiest gift you'll ever give, and it thrills the people who get it. They too get action plans every single week with experts and their very own breakthroughs. Give the gift of premium to someone you care about. Just go to boldencounters.tv. It takes just seconds. And pass that spark on to someone else. Thank you. Even great leaders get stuck. Others thrive. I'm Mark Cook, New York Times bestselling author, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. Clients upgrade leaders' retreats and conferences with my 5-star keynotes and breakouts on leaders' bold encounters. Also, leaders get weekly consulting as they execute key steps. Plus, brief check-ins guarantee results, live or via Zoom. After turnarounds as chief executive and 9 global studies of 2 million award-winning leaders, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands with my approach in over 50 cities worldwide. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Leaders create revenue breakthroughs and clients see new profits. Now let's lead with Bold Encounters today.